And wait, we need to zoom out of the camera. Good morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Monday, August 28th, 2023. It is 9:04 a.m. This session is set to go until 10 a.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. Vice Chair Ty Menser is in the boardroom. Commissioner Gary Edwards joining us via Zoom. We also have County Manager Meryl Chavez in the boardroom, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder. We are going to be discussing the voting center and funding briefing, and this was a request from Auditor Mary Hall. So I will pass it straight to her.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Commissioner Mejia. And thanks for allowing this opportunity to share this morning. I know there's been a lot of discussion about building out our voting center, and we're calling it our election center because it's basically made up of two buildings. The ballot processing center is one part of it, and then the voter services / voting center is the other one. So in the future, when you hear us referring to the election center, that's really what we're talking about. And I brought some guests here with me today. I know you hear from me a lot about this topic, and we spoke on Thursday. But I wanted to have some other people talk to you about what our future looks like, threat landscape, possible optional funding. And so I have Secretary Hobbs on screen who's going to start us off. And then I'll go ahead and let my guests from the Department of Homeland Security go ahead and introduce themselves and what their function is in Region 10.
Yeah, so again, my name is Noe Isaac Cavazos. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security's agency of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I'm a Protected Security Advisor, which basically looks at the physical security of buildings and facilities that require upgrades in physical security, and we provide that as a free service. I work here in the state of Washington. I've been here since 2016. And I basically support the entire state, mostly on the west side, but the entire state. My colleague next to me, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Janice Spring. I am also a Protective Security Advisor for the Department of Homeland Security, and we are within CISA, as Isaac said, which is it's a handful, but it's the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. The acronym is CISA. We do physical security. There is some convergence, I should say, with the cybersecurity also, and the IT portion. So we are here to offer you some insights and potentially alternatives as to what you can look at in your design. I am a former, I've been with DHS 16 years. I've been in the PSA cadre now essentially 6 months, so I'm new with Isaac, but I came from the chemicals inspector side. So I have 7 years of regulatory background, and prior to that, I was up at headquarters for a few years as section chief for outreach in stakeholder engagement. So we bring a broad spectrum of knowledge here, and we are here to answer your questions and hopefully provide you some valuable input. Thank you for having us.
All right. So I thought Secretary Hobbs can't be in person. He's going to be meeting with the Japanese consulate up in Seattle. But thank you very much for taking the time, Secretary Hobbs. And I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to, Auditor, do you want me to just go ahead and start the testimony here?
Absolutely.
Oh, great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I'm here today at request of Auditor Hall supporting the new voting facility and to provide both the national and statewide perspective on election security. And I want to take a few minutes to emphasize the importance of securing this facility and the election staff that work here. Not only do election workers need to prepare for cyber attacks lobbied by both foreign and domestic bad actors, but they also continue to face intimidation, harassment, and threats of violence. Above all else, these cyber and physical threats keep me up at night, and as such is a primary focus for me in my office. When people do not feel safe, they often choose another vocation. As a result, we are seeing record early retirements and resignations. Recruiting is also a big challenge, and I'm sure Auditor Hall can speak to that. Election administration is a profession. It takes time to learn, and every time an experienced person leaves, their knowledge and ability goes with them. I am committed to creating a safe working environment, and people should not live in fear. These threats are taking place in more than just the highly contentious battleground states. In the most recent August primary, and folks, that was only a few weeks ago, 2 pieces of mail containing suspicious substances were delivered to elections offices in Washington state. One of those threatening letters had fentanyl in it. But the message was very clear: your safety is at risk. And the one that was mailed to King County had a very threatening letter in it. The threat level against election administrators in our state during the following 2020 election was so high, the state patrol stationed a vehicle at one of the workers' homes, and the Pierce County Sheriff was stationed outside another. Large counties such as King and Pierce counties have secured their facilities, and I encourage all county auditors to do the same. You cannot access the Jefferson or Franklin County election offices without going through a bag search, a metal detection, and gun safes are provided outside the facility. These threats are real and happening in our own state. That is why I worked with the legislature, and Auditor Hall helped me in 2022 to secure $80,000 per year for each county for 3 years that can be spent to improve security. This includes both cyber threat protection and physical security of facilities, and most importantly, election workers. These funds have helped counties large and small to shore up their security, but that is not enough. As you all know, $80,000 for capital projects is just simply not enough. My office has also provided a document for counties to use to design a vote counting spaces called Voting Systems Integrity Recommendations. I urge the county to use this document as part of the process. Auditor Hall is working to find resources whenever she can, including grants, federal funding, state funding, and of course her request to this body. And I will tell you that Auditor Hall visits Olympia. Well, she's in Olympia. She visits the legislature almost every day during session to try to get more funding. So she's doing everything that she can. Auditor Hall's efforts in the legislature have greatly benefited the county budget. She was the difference maker in 2020 in changing state law to get even year reimbursement of election costs to counties by the state. Prior to the change, the state did not reimburse county government for even year election costs. Those costs belong to the county general fund. Thank you, Auditor Hall, for that. The bill had languished session after session in the legislature until it finally passed in 2020. As a result, Auditor Hall tells me that the net result to Thurston County was $673,000 in addition to funding in 2022. Her office estimates more than 1.2 million new reimbursements to the county expected results in 2024. This change is permanent, and revenues will flow to the county each even year in the election. The remodel that Thurston County is planning is a great opportunity to improve security as you improve election administration. And I hope this gives you every consideration to fully fund the security elements in the remodel. And let me just take a moment as I throw away my notes to tell you this. I am your Secretary of State, but I'm also a person that served in the military, continues to serve in the military, and I served overseas in both Kosovo and Iraq during the elections. It was myself and my unit that provided security in the Kosovo election during their first election. It was my unit that distributed the nomination ballot boxes to the political parties in Iraq. And I will tell you, I never thought that I would be the Secretary of State now. And never in my wildest dreams did I think that the amount of violence, the amount of misinformation, the amount of disruption caused at our election, the elections in those two countries and the workers would ever come to our country, and it has. And let me remind the commissioners that the National Guard was deployed to the Capitol. I know this because I'm in the National Guard and my soldiers were deployed to the Capitol because of the demonstrations that were there. And as someone that listens to the threat briefings, the classified ones, along with Homeland Security, I can tell you the threat is just going to increase. Your auditor, and I don't know if she'll mention it or not, but her life was threatened, along with the Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, at the time. The threat is all too real. It's getting worse. And to make matters even worse is we have malign actors overseas who are fanning the flames of extremists to go after the very people that are trying to secure your elections. So I hope that today that you'll reconsider and hopefully help Mary get the funding that she needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Hobbs. Anybody have any questions for the Secretary?
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No, I don't think I have any questions. Thanks to the Secretary for kind of bringing us up to speed, but no questions. Thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer?
I'm just curious, I heard about those envelopes, but can you remind me, who were they addressed to, or where did they go to?
Yes, one went to King County, and luckily I have David Elliott here, who staffers, I believe, went to Benton, but I'm not sure. I know it went to a rural county.
But was it like addressed to the auditor or an elections officer or something?
It was addressed to the election center. I'm not sure. We can definitely get you that information.
Good morning. This is David Elliott. I'm Policy Director for the Secretary of State. One was sent to the King County Elections Office, and it was in a return envelope for a ballot, and it contained a threatening letter and powder, and they discovered that was fentanyl. The other one was sent to Okanagan County. Same thing. If you're familiar with the way the ballots work, it was inside the security envelope of a ballot, so there's no way to connect back to who sent it. And it was filled with powder as well, which thankfully turned out to be bicarbonate of soda. But as the Secretary said, the threat was certainly understood.
And Commissioner, one last, what happened in the last election, not this year, in the last primary, but the 2022, we did have an incident reported of people appearing at one of the drop boxes that was apparently armed, or they were in a car with guns. But by the time we had authorities go out there, the county had authorities go out there, they had disappeared. So, it's just not the same anymore. I mean, elections. I mean, Auditor Hall and all the auditors around the county would love to make elections boring again, right? But it's not. It's become a threat vector for people to go after, to disrupt our country, disrupt democracy.
Okay, I do have some questions. My first question is in regards to the funding aspect, right? The state in total for this project, we have $300,000 from the state from a grant that the auditor got, but that is just a penny in the big pot that we have to do. I mean, you're coming here and telling us we need to have a secure election center, but I'm not seeing the backing of the funding for that. I'm not seeing it from the state side. I'm not seeing it from the federal side. Everyone is talking about it, right? And everyone's saying we need more election security, but it's being laid on the backs of the commission, of the Thurston County residents to be able to pay for this. The only reason we're able to consider the ballot processing center and except for, vote this November is because the board decided to add it to the public safety tax. But I'm not seeing a lot of support from the state. I'm not seeing a lot of support from the federal side. And so I'm not disagreeing with you that, we do need election security and that there are situations happening. but I'm not seeing that so much from the legislator side. I see just a lot of talk about it, but really not anyone putting their money, where their mouth is. And that's really what counts for us right here as we're making these decisions is we need to see this funding to be able to prioritize it. But right now, as a board, we're facing a very financial difficult situation. And, it's really difficult for us, to kind of face this. And I'm just wondering, is this going to be a priority for the legislator as it comes up next year?
Well, I will tell you that, yeah, that it's absolutely distressing that you have to, and it's not just you, it's other counties across the state. That's why when I got into office working with Auditor Hall, we increased the amount of money. I mean, we never had these kind of grants before, ever, until I got in there, and so now we're doing it. And then thanks to Auditor Hall, she just looking at the estimates, 1.2 million in new reimbursements to your county, right? This is something that didn't happen, and was it $673,000 that additional funding in 2022 wouldn't have happened, right? And that came from the state. So I would say in the last few years, that narrative has changed. And I certainly will advocate, I'm not in the legislature anymore, but I will certainly advocate on more funding for certain counties. Not all counties need it, because King County's got, they got a rich county there and they got a pretty secure facility. But, counties like yourself, counties that are in rural parts of Washington State, like Columbia County, I mean, they need the resources. And so I will work with our legislators, including your own legislator, Sam Hunt, who sits on Ways and Means, to ensure that the funding is secure. But I will tell you that, look, it's not my fault. It's not your fault. It's literally extremists who want to undermine this country. And it's unfortunate that we were put in this situation, but just like how I was called up to deploy to Iraq and Kosovo, I didn't want to do that. But unfortunately, there's bad people out there that do bad things. And now, your county workers who all they want to do is do the right thing, they're going under threat, and it's unfortunate. And I get it. I understand. It's a horrible situation to be in.
Well, I can tell you this, and from the side of the federal government, I echo everything that Secretary Hobbs is mentioning, in that we have been seeing through our organizations and discussions with the different folks within the federal government, to include the FBI, the U.S. Postal Service, and other organizations. The threat is real. It is actually there, and the uptick of monitoring this kind of thing, because they know that it's going to come again during this next general election period, is anticipate this already, because this is starting to happen. The only thing is that we can't specifically go after anyone in particular, because there isn't this is the threat and this is the person kind of thing. But if you go out and they do a lot of trolling in social media and the internet and so forth, they start to pick up pieces of information where there is discussions going on about how exactly to start making threats and actually attacking facilities. I know through my experience now, because I work as a protected security advisor, and I go to the different locations that I've seen statewide now, there is a huge disparity between those counties that are smaller, that don't have, like Secretary Hobbs mentioned, a large population that they can tax, so they can include some of these fundings to be able to secure election facilities. There's a huge disparity. And the problem is that those counties, to include yourselves in this county, you're basically left to the situation where you accept the risk, and that acceptance may come with actual lives lost. And so what my perspective is, I'm given information at the request of Auditor Hall here, to come and actually look at a facility that they're expecting to try and take in and own it, so they can do additional things and make it more appropriate and convenient for them to be able to do their jobs. And to me, it makes sense to do things at the beginning, because otherwise, once the construction is done, it's going to cost you more money even then afterwards if you want to do upgrades to a facility. Because now, you have to redesign, you got to tear down things again, reopen them, and then include the new upgrades. So from our visit and our review of the facility that we're talking about, we provided, and I'm sure that she provided maybe a sample or a viewing of the assessment of what we thought might be necessary to include if you're going to do certain things to upgrade a new facility, what things you might want to consider. None of these say that they're absolutes, because we're not a regulatory agency. We're not telling you you have to have this. But when it comes to saving lives and putting situations where you're eliminating or buying down the risk of that threat coming into your doors, these are the things that we provide as insight. So I agree with him. In my visits with different counties, I have heard already through discussions with other auditors in other counties the exact same thing. I mean, they're literally saying they're parking in our parking lot and they're watching us day in, day out, and all the way into the night when we're actually leaving late at night. And our facilities have no ballistic anything for our windows, no hardening of any particular facility of the structures inside. So there's no ballistic anything inside either. So if you get in, and that's it. Everyone's going to be feeling the impacts. To include the lack in many cases of the adequate lighting and additional cameras that would be at least something that would give you an immediate notice of somebody trying to do something that's nefarious. So there's a huge disparity from county to county in some cases, from a very rich county to a very more rural county. Thurston County is trying to do the right thing through Auditor Hall's work, and I think it's something that should be commended in her efforts, right? And unfortunately, like you said, there is no money coming from us other than the grants that are available that she has attempted to try and get some funding through. Unfortunately, that hasn't been successful in some instances, at no fault of them trying to go after the funds. But that is the work that is happening. So we're here to support the very same initiatives to try and make sure that the counties don't have to accept the risk after it has actually occurred, right? After someone's life is lost, and then you're dealing with the situation after the fact.
So I don't think anyone here is arguing, right, the facts of the state of the matter right now. But the facts is that we scraped whatever we could to be able to do this. I mean, we scraped our building reserves. So now in building 1, if our HVAC goes down, we're in trouble and we're gonna have to figure out a way to pay that bill. But we scraped it because we're putting this as a priority. The commissioners have consistently put this as a priority, yet we're not seeing that same priority from the state. We're not seeing that same priority from the federal government, and it's extremely frustrating. I mean, we scraped whatever we had left for the from ARPA, from the lost revenue. I know Robin after called additional counties to see if there was other possible ways to access ARPA, and at the same time, right? We're just continuing to see this, and it's great that you come in and you tell us we need to do all these upgrades, but all those upgrades come with a huge cost, and we are just being placed in a very extremely difficult situation on whether we might do this, but hey, we might be facing layoffs too, right? So election staff, we might be cutting those because we have to fund the building instead, right? That's kind of what we're facing.
If I may, I'd like to contribute. And I'd like to, there's an opinion piece that just came out in July, and I'd like to refer the group to that piece. It's a bigger picture than the federal government not wanting to provide funding. As you are all aware, we have divisions within our congressional branch of the government and the Senate. So we have the Congress wanting to cut the funding to the states for election funding to zero. We have the Senate that wants to increase it to $400 million. So you've got that dichotomy going on at the same time, and because you have the divisions within the two different branches of the legislature, you are almost at a stalemate. So to say that you're not seeing the results of it, it's not for lack of effort. It's not because we're not there. I can also tell you that the director of CISA, Jen Easterly, we have 4 targeted priorities. We had these 4 targeted priorities for FY23. Elections was one of them. For FY24, we just got the new targeted priorities 2 weeks ago. elections is still there at the top of it. So we are trying to utilize every option we can to almost, you can say backdoor, side door, circumvent, try and figure out other inventive ways to help you get the funding. As Auditor Hall knows, I am one of the reviewers and approvers for FEMA grants for the states. And we just got through doing a full slate of them, a whole slew of them. And one of the purposes of us going out and doing what we do and making these recommendations is to say, okay, we've come out, now include this information in your grant application. And you can let them know that DHS actually came out and did a security assessment, a vulnerability assessment, to help you look at these risk areas to try and strengthen up your security posture. That going into your grant application helps strengthen that. So we're offering every avenue we have available and all of our tools in our toolkit to try and help you. And as much as I know it's not concrete there, our hope is that eventually on the back end, you will be able to be reimbursed for those. But my question to you would be, if there's an incident, if there's a catastrophic or some type of incident that has a repercussion that is violent or it is negative, what impact does that have on the county then as far as expense?
We can say that for any of our buildings,
agree.
really.
I
And,
agree.
and I mean, we're constantly measuring because we can say that for any of our, not just like we can say that for this building, we can say that for our main campus, where our courthouses were. There was an incident in King County with one of our courthouses as well. We can say that for our public works department.
It's never ending.
So
So before the commissioner answer your question, good morning, Ramiro Chavez, County Manager. First of all, I'd like to thank Secretary Hobbs to join us this morning. I appreciate your perspective and our guests from Homeland Security. I can probably tell you the Board of County Commissioners clearly understand the threats. I clearly understands the reality that all of us are facing related to elections. And there is not a single moment in which they are willing to go through the process to find ways as to how we can mitigate the threats. So they're fully aware what you stated. There is no new news to the commissioners to the threats that we're facing before, now, and what is coming. What I'm just curious about the timing of this briefing, because we just last week agreed as to how we need to move forward on this project. There we find a compromise as to how we can incorporate security measures on this project. So I'm asking the outer whole as to what the timing of this briefing is and what the intended purpose of this briefing. Because with all due respect, I do not get it.
So I've never felt that what I've had to say to you or Robin has really made it to the board. So I needed this opportunity. You're great gatekeepers. There's a lot of money that is available that are choices that you have made. There's $10 million of lost revenue through ARPA that can be used for anything. Elections is an eligible cost. Those are your choices. And I never had an opportunity to truly present that to you. Although I presented it to you, I presented it to Robin. It was important for me, for the board to hear this. You know, I also worked very hard for 4 years to get even year funding. And while it wasn't all me, I carried a huge amount of that water over the finish line, which if you look at the even year funding for 22 and 24, that's $1.8 million of new revenue to the county that the county has never seen. RCW is a requirement that departments are provided with facilities adequate to do the job. We don't have adequate space, nor have we ever had adequate space for our voter services operation. We could have moved in here. I was told there was not enough space, so we are now in Building 5 and it's temporary in nature. I was told that we would be in the Mottman Center by 2024, which is our critical date. Now we're looking at August, and that is without any delays. And we know how construction is and delays. You know, I provided you with a letter. There is opportunities for Burn JAG grant funding, but we don't have a countywide EEOP. I was turned down Friday to submit a grant that would have given us 45 days to comply. And that was a small amount of money. That was just over $25,000. The next round of funding is $250,000. And the next round of funding is larger than that. And I believe Jana has more information on those. And until we get a countywide EEOP, that funding is not available to us. I am doing everything I can and have been since the minute I became auditor to bring money into this county to fund adequate facilities that we have never had. If you go out to the ballot processing center and you're inside the building and you look at the door where the employees enter, you see sky. It's not an adequate facility. The hinges are on the outside. Look at your house, your front door. Hinges are on the inside. They can't be taken off. There are a lot of security improvements that need to happen, yet the can keeps getting kicked down the road. And it has been for years. I'm not here new for the very first time to bring up this topic. I just thought because we are in the middle of this project, decisions are being made. They cut $1 million out of this program or out of this project that went for security. They changed to a ballistic material in the safe rooms, but it's not impenetrable. Go back and listen. It's not impenetrable. Is that really safe? What good is it then? This is a serious issue. And I'm sorry, Romero, if your busy schedule doesn't accommodate this, but I thought it was important for the board to hear, not just from me, but experts in the field, because really, I don't feel like I'm being taken seriously.
And I want to respond to Auditor Hall because I've had many discussions with you about this. First of all, is the ARPA lost revenue. You said there are $10 million. Well, transfer to the general fund were $7 million, and I asked Robin specifically for this information. And that was a decision that the board made in order to help our fund balance to be able to pay our employees. Because that's a big thing. We still haven't settled with our unions yet, right? We are going to have that big impact to our budget. We are having more than one consideration at hand. I've heard you many times come and say, our election staff isn't paid enough. Well, where does that come from? It comes from the general fund. So that's where that $7 million went to. Then we did an employee retention bonus of $1.5 billion. And then we did a sheriff retention bonus of $142,000. The Tenino Agricultural Park, that was a decision that the board made before, was for $500,000. And the voter registration center, which is what we left over, was the $821,500. So that's what we use our ARPA lost revenue on. And Robin contacted the other counties to see if there was other ways that ARPA could be used for election security, and there was not, besides lost revenue. And we had already used all of our lost revenue onto that. And I don't think there's been a point where the board hasn't heard you, but it's always been an availability of funding, right? And that's why the board made that decision to include the ballot processing center in the public safety tax this November. I mean, we all came, we all decided, and that was an idea from Robin. Robin brought that up and she was like, hey, there's a possibility to tie the ballot processing center into the public safety tax. And after they looked at it, the board decided, yeah, that's a good way to go because there's no way that we can fund a $7 million project. Now, for this voter registration center, again, we scrapped everything we could. We did our building reserves. We did whatever we had from ARPA. We gathered from here. ARPA interest was another way to pay for the voter registration center. And it came out way over what we had planned, $1 million over. And we just don't know where to get the funding from. I mean, we all gave a thumbs up to continue on with $500,000 in the hole, where we don't even know where we're going to pay that for yet. We're still deciding. And so for you to come here and say that the board hasn't been supportive it's a slap in the face, because we've been trying to support you, Auditor Hall. Anytime you've brought a request, we've really tried to accommodate you and try to accommodate whatever, I'm not sure with the Atrium here situation, right? But I'm just trying to figure this out, because if it's $1 million in the hole versus 500,000 of things that we can pinch down, I'm gonna go for the 500,000 because that's $500,000 less that we have to go look for funding elsewhere.
I'll just say two things if I could. I do want to take issue to say that we cut 1 million out. That $1 million was never, we never had that $1 million.
It was in the design.
Yeah, but that was beyond, above and beyond what the budget that we thought that we had. The issue, since we're getting into this kind of specificity, I mean, you guys brought it up at the beginning about recruitment, retention, losing people. We're facing union contracts that are unresolved. We're facing demands for 7-8% cost of living increases that will bankrupt this county if they're done. And I mean, so like security's not just about what you pack into the walls of the building. It's also about staffing and security on that side. And if we can't afford to pay, if we have to do that and we have to cut staff, that's not increasing election security either. So it's a complete picture that I'm trying to figure out how to get to the best place with the resources we have. And that's kind of just what we're balancing. And just to say, I mean, there's obviously some tension under the surface, and I don't even care about all, the timing of this and that, and who, I mean, I don't care about all that. This is one of the most important issues, absolutely. You don't have to convince me of that. Elections is absolutely, and that's why we were willing to put it into the public safety thing. I can say to voters with a straight face, this is essential to your security, to community security. So there's no problem with convincing the board of the seriousness of what we're dealing with. But we've invested in a whole bunch of things, as Commissioner Mejia said, and it's nobody's fault, really. Prices have gone up, designs were more than we had, but I did not see when we launched through this program of moving pieces with different buildings, we were not facing the inflation issue, which has really just, in terms of the timing of that issue together with the employee contracts, and there's nothing about inflation that increases county revenues at all. Sales tax is down. Property tax is capped at 1%. We get nothing more because inflation goes up, but we get demands. Everything costs more, employees want more, and I don't know how we manage that. So we're just, from my perspective, we're doing our best, and I don't know where that leaves us.
Commissioner Edwards.
Commissioner Edwards, go ahead, and then Dr. Hall.
Okay, I couldn't have said anything that was said by my seatmates. I don't think I could have said that better myself. But I am recognizing that you're right. Inflation is crazy out of control over the last 2 years. It's like 15% at least. And we do want to retain the help that we have, and we want to be able to recruit. It's tough to do so when we're short of funding. I have two questions. I heard about a week ago that EEOP fund, our policy, was done, and that we would then be able to put in previously eligible grant requests, I guess. So I'm curious about an answer. Now we're getting conflicting information. It's done or it's not done, and what would that take? The other question I have is, we've got a Justice Department that's going to prioritize whatever action they feel they need to take towards jurisdictions that, I don't know if you want to call it misuse, don't use the funding exactly as it came out with ARPA. So yes, we got the 10 million. That's been explained how that was utilized to try and cover some of these costs. But is there any chance that we could just take a gamble, use some of the other ARPA money that has not been, even though it's been earmarked, we maybe could review that and take some of the other money, even though it is not recognized as a valid expenditure, spend that on some of this election need that we have, on the chance, now it's a bit of a gamble, that we would get a pass from the Justice Department. If we did not get a pass from the Justice Department, maybe we would be able to cover that overage by our emergency fund that I think it's got about 3 million in it. I don't have that number in front of me right now. And that takes a vote of the 3 commissioners to free up to spend something. So those are a couple of issues that maybe we could explore, but I don't want people to think for a minute that what my seatmates have laid out is not right on target. So I think we're together on that, but I would like to hear about that equal opportunity business on the fund. I thought we had a policy in place that made us eligible. So what happened to that? And then might there be any legal discussion about utilizing money from one pot of money that came with ARPA towards solving this problem and maybe get a pass from the Justice Department? That's it for me. Thank you.
I can address the EEOP, Commissioner, if I may. From our perspective, my perspective, the EEOP plan was completed. However, Auditor Hall secured a different opinion from the county auditor as well as the grants manager. They concluded that it's not completed. So that's where we are.
So we actually tried to put the grant through, but Brandon said that it would not fly because it's specific to the prosecuting attorney, the sheriff, and who else? Pardon me?
Public defense.
And public defense. It's not a countywide EEOP. So it needs to be a countywide EEOP for us to qualify. You know, I was willing to put it through, but Robin would not sign the grant application, and you concurred, Romero. So we did not put it through on Friday, which was a deadline. You know, the other option, I mean, we do have a $33 million ending fund balance, you know, that could be tapped into. You know, I'm just afraid that, you know, this project needs to start moving forward or it's not going to make it by the 2004 general election, so.
But that's my point. We already agreed to move forward with this project last week, Mary. And you were present on that briefing.
And absolutely.
So,
I'm just saying,
and
I'm asking,
and
here's what I'm
laid-
asking is,
we
can we
already
put,
laid out the plan to move forward
can
on
we
that
put-
project with you present on the briefing.
right, well, there's a $400,000 shortfall, which
And
was
the
a question
commissioners
last
took,
week.
and the commissioners
And-
took the risk to
I
move
know.
forward with the
And
project to
what
find
we're
the funding.
talking about today is what I am asking today is putting some of those security measures back in the plan.
Well, that's different.
So that would increase the gap.
Can I ask the folks here, you guys were part of the walkthrough or the.
Yes.
it says- Can you, I don't remember the full list of what was taken out, but is there one element or a couple, I mean, is there one element that really raised?
Prioritizing.
Yeah, is there something that really made your head explode to think that it would be taken out versus, you know, I'm sure they're all important, but just to hear your perspective on that.
It's really hard for me to say because I'm not in the position that you are in, right? You are basically as a county, and I totally appreciate the hard position you guys are in making decisions of this nature. I know that it can't be an easy thing to try and balance from, you know, taking and robbing from Peter to pay Paul and then going back and forth to make things happen. But to answer your question, it is hard to say because when we look at a facility and the designs in this particular instance in advance of it actually being built out, we're taking into consideration all the threats from the external going in, how someone will be able to affect a particular location. All of those things are essentially this is what I would look at if I was the bad guy trying to do something, right? You're looking at all the vulnerabilities that might exist or they could exist, and it's all based on it. Well, if this is the way it is, then this is where I would go. It's not an exact science because the facility has not been built out yet. You're just looking at the shell of the thing. So it's hard for me to say what I would prioritize versus, something else. What goes first or second or third, because I don't know exactly where the threat is going to come from. I mean, it could be that a person decides to park a vehicle on the backside of the building to blow it up so that the impact is felt throughout. And the fact that particular facility is a metal structure that will take the impact, but it's not going to eliminate it. It's hard to say, right? Are they going to try to come from the vantage point where they're least likely to be observed, or are they going to come in through the soft target where the windows and the doors are? These are things that if you try to prioritize like that, you're essentially saying, well, I'm willing to take this risk versus that risk, right? And that's not where I lie in a position to be able to make that call. That's something that you as county officials and Mary as the auditor would have to say, well, I will assume this risk and hope that in the next go round, we can maybe try and harden that. In all instances, when we talked about things like this, and we're like, look, you're never going to get a facility that is absolutely intact and will be secure with no issues whatsoever. I mean, if that were the case, there would be no reasons why countries develop bombs. So you're never going to get there, but you can always try and do one more step forward in trying to, get things to be a little bit more secure. It is very difficult, sir. I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I will add to that and just say the way I tried to look at it when we did the initial walkthrough, I tried to look at it as if it was a family member of mine or a neighbor of mine or a friend of mine or a church member that could possibly be working in that facility. And when I personalized it, then I looked at where would I want those hardened measures to be, to offer a delay, a deterrent. Because as Isaac said, you're never going to make a building 100%. And that's not the goal. The goal is to give enough time so that your souls that are there have an opportunity to have an increased survival rate. That's the bottom line. That's what we're trying to make sure that you do. So that being said, looking at that structure, and I don't know if the commissioners have gone out and done a walkthrough like we did. We were not scheduled to be here today. This was a very last minute for us. We were in different places, and we rearranged our schedules in order to make sure we could come here because the auditor asked us to. So we understand the position you're in, and I wouldn't want to be in your position, to be perfectly honest with you. But that being said, I always try to put myself in the spot of, what if that was me working there in that building? What if it was me working here? And then you look at the priorities, and that's what I would ask you. If your offices were there in that building, and that's where you were meeting, and that's where a potential danger was, versus being here in this building, if you look at the vulnerabilities here, what would be the methods you would want as far as target hardening so that someone wouldn't have direct access to be able to get in here to you? We came this morning and I looked at it because that's how we're trained. We have to do it. And I saw all kinds of vulnerabilities. And I said, we're having a meeting on the first floor. As soon as you come in the entrance, and we've got one person who is between that area, that lobby, that foyer, and all of you that are in here that are making these decisions that will impact the entire county. To me, where's the priority?
I never signed in.
I never
know
signed
me from
in.
Adam. I could
Those
swear
are
in.
things we're trained to look at. And from the background, I have an intelligence background. So we're looking at all of that, looking at you. And we're not here to scare anyone or intimidate anyone or put a fear factor in anyone. That's not our job. We're not a regulatory agency. We're here to offer guidance, support, recommendations, options for consideration. The ultimate decision is yours. But if you come to us and ask us, we're going to tell you the truth, because we've seen it happen so many times, and they will come back to us. We've had counties that will come back and say, you know what, you recommended this to us, and we didn't put it in effect. And now we've got this issue. So it's gonna cost us 2 to 3 times more to go back now and retrofit and try and accommodate for that, because we didn't. If you don't have the money, you don't have the money.
Right,
That's
if
just the bottom line.
we have 5 things that we're trying to do and we have money for 2, if you don't give us guidance, we're just gonna throw a dart at the wall. I mean,
Well,
you're the one that's done the walkthrough, you're the one with the expertise, you're the one that knows the
If
the
you-
likelihood of various levels of threat. I don't. So if we don't get guidance from you, then I'm just gonna be guessing.
Well,
First
that
entry.
was provided in
In the-
report.
Right.
So, you never
Oh,
got
they
the
did,
report?
they don't have that information.
Okay, well,
So-
I don't know why that didn't come across, but I'll get it to you.
Okay,
Today.
they should have that.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
when we did the walkthrough, we took a couple of things in perspective. One is, there's 2 assets that we're looking at, people and the ballots. Right, because we're trying to secure the election process and the ballots themselves. And so during the course of this, when people are coming in to do registrations and voting, we're also trying to make sure that people have access to vote, right? And so we're looking at a lot of different things, and in some instances, when the votes do get cast there, they're actually where they're gonna be held in temporary status before they move to the actual processing location. So we're looking at a couple of different things. We're looking at people and the assets of what are the critical points. And it's from that perspective that we're looking at the security measures. Now, when we walk through, we were talking about, okay, if you're trying to secure the asset being the ballot, then this particular storage facility where you're gonna house them temporarily has to have these parameters in it, right? And so we talked about an overhead cover on it to ensure that someone can't climb in over the top through a false ceiling or anything like that. Making sure that it was some kind of a method of monitoring it, whether it be with CCTV and some kind of alarm system or something like that, to include what they already do in their other location, which is their own locks and tags that make sure there's notification of someone that has tampered with it. So those things were being looked at. We talked about if you're gonna be using the internet and it's gonna be available, making sure that those wires are secured in conduit so that they can't be cut by just anyone that wants to reach into the ceiling and then just get access and cut the wires. So if those things are secured in a different way, maybe not at the location where someone that is just walking in the building can have access to it, then perhaps that would be an area where you could probably say, well, we don't have to expend the conduit expense there because it's not even available for folks to get access to. So things like that could be a difference. But we're looking at it as part of the discussion that we had, and like, we don't know where your wire is gonna be. So if you're going to do it elsewhere, not across where folks are gonna be public access to your wires, essentially, communications and lines and stuff like that. So those are the things that I would mention. I'm shocked that you didn't get the report. I'm really, I'm so sorry about that. Make sure that will come to you.
Let me get Commissioner Edwards. He has a question. Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Well, I just want to follow up on some of the issues that have been brought up, and things like signing in, more delays for the public, decisions we make every day about the assessor has field officers that go out. They're faced with threat. Should we have 2 maybe? Deputy sheriffs that respond to things, the building inspectors that go out, or that have offices here. So we make those decisions every day about where to place and limit the threat as much as we possibly can for our employees. So I don't think elections is really any different. Is it a problem? You're darn right it's a problem, but the revenue just doesn't match for everything that we need to do for our community and to keep everybody safe all the way through. So, I mean, we could have 3 armed guards at the front or at each door coming in and out of here, or at each window they could walk through. But we have a certain amount of reality that we have to deal with. And I think that's what we're dealing with today, is how to figure out the best way to deal with it. And I think Commissioner Mentzer's questions were right on target. So thank you.
So there's been a request by Auditor Hall, and her request is to reconsider instead of the 500,000, it was 400 and something, I do not remember the spreadsheet. And then the initial one, and I'm seeing Rick, do you have those numbers, those exact numbers, Rick?
I do.
Do you mind sharing the one that we decided to move forward and then the one that Auditor Hall is requesting us to move?
I think the big thing for me is the safe room walls, that security was taken out to something that isn't that much more effective than just normal sheetrock. And I don't know what we did with the windows. But the vestibule is a big thing, and I know that's a very expensive proposition, but that creates an additional vulnerability. So anything we could do to strengthen that and the inside of the facility.
I have two pieces of information if the commissioners would like. By the Rick Thomas, I'm the,
Rick, we need to maybe, Madam Chair, follow up on this conversation.
Yes.
We only have 30 seconds, and I don't think it will be fair for Rick to go through the details of this request. I think Auditor Hall has placed a request to you, and as any other request when you face, we'll bring that matter next Tuesday for your consideration.
For agenda setting?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
Then,
Rick can
but
come prepared.
the project is still moving forward as what was approved by the board initially,
Last
just
week.
the gap is what we're discussing now. It's how big that gap is going to be. Okay, Auditor Hall, thank you so much. Secretary Hobbs, thank you so much for joining us this morning, as well as the folks for Department of Homeland Security. It is 10 a.m. And we are adjourned.